Now, if you have a company or individual that is sanctioned on the list officially, okay, however, that company or individual wants to use an attorney either to fight being on the sanctions list, or they had their property confiscated, they had their property forfeited to the US government, they want to make their case why that should not be. How can they hire an American attorney if you cannot do business with such individuals or companies?
Yeah, that is a very, very good question. Number one, if a company or person is under sanctions, they cannot, any U.S. person, including attorneys are also people. Uh, you may be surprised here, you know, but any U.S. persons would be prohibited from dealing with that company. So, in order to provide services to such entity, an attorney would need to obtain its own license.
Okay.
The terms of such license pretty specific. First of all, the license would be granted only in connection with the situations, with the matters that relate to sanctions. In
Okay.
other words,
So it's very
a firm.
specific, very
Yes,
narrow.
very specific. Yeah. So in other words, you can't just, if you're a sanctioned entity, you can't simply go ahead and get an attorney, for example, to defend itself in the court, and to defend itself, or to engage in the transaction. That transaction would be itself under sanctions. But there are certain transactions that are not under sanctions. They're licensed. For example, there is a winding down transactions
Okay.
where you have entity is sanctioned, and the U.S. person is allowed for a certain period of time to engage in winding down transaction in order to separate or terminate its relationship with that sanctioned entities. That typically you have a license for that.
And
But
how long would it take to get such a license?
well,
An attorney.
there is a general license, what they call a general license for winding down transactions. And then there is a license for the attorney, which may take from weeks to months, more or less, to get such a license. Of course, you need to provide very detailed information about the transactions, you need to provide detailed information about the persons involved, and a lot of information that would need to be.
But it's important to go through the process, because otherwise the attorney, him or herself, can wind up in cuffs.
Of course, yes. Well, I mean, not necessarily in cuffs, but certainly penalized in some fashion. Yes.
What if you are a non-attorney, but you want to be hired by a sanctioned company? For example, a sanctioned oligarch feels like he was besmirched by the US government. He wants to manage his public profile. He wants to engage a PR firm in America for favorable coverage to explain him or herself. Can a PR company, for example, get such a license?
That is a good question. First of all, of course, without license, you can't engage as a PR company. PR company cannot engage in this type of transactions.
Right.
I would think, and I'm probably guessing at this point, that it would be quite difficult to obtain such license if you're a sanctioned person. Again, typically licenses are granted to engage in winding down transactions or certain specific transactions that are allowed, that are non-sanctioned. So that could be problematic, but there could be some other options to deal with that.
Because probably you're not considered an essential service provider.
That's true.
If you're a PR agent.
Yeah, if you
whereas an attorney, I mean, your services are essential. I mean, look, in America, murderers and rapists are guaranteed legal representation in courts. So I would assume Russian oligarchs could also merit having attorneys.
Well, I mean, the difference being is that this is a Russian oligarch who is not in the United States, and here you have a person in the United States who allegedly committed a crime,
Right.
and who is allegedly subject to court proceedings, a defendant in court proceedings. So it's a difference, and it's a difference between you know, I think United States has a very different view U.S. law on when the issue is about the imprisonment, when the freedom, when the person is in that prison, and versus the situation when there's a property at issue.
Makes sense. Makes sense.